Globespan is a Guyanese dialogue moving towards the realization of one nation in one Guyana. It's a platform that offers an all-inclusive discussion with the pros, the cons, the ones that have taken a side, and the ones that stand in the middle. Globespan believes agreeing and disagreeing are part of the nation building. Globespan believes that every Guyanese voice is part of the nation building. As we span the globe for voices from the diaspora and those living home, we stand on our commitment that we are all Guyanese working towards one nation in one Guyana.
This land is our land now.
As the world turns on its axis, bringing changes, we as Guyanese must adapt to those changes for a better Guyana for all. Globespan stands on its axis with its belief that one nation, one Guyana, one destiny must include voices from all corners of Guyana.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, my fellow Guyanese brothers and sisters. We are back here again, Globespan 24/7 on our usual Wednesday program. I want to be able to enlist you on some of Globespan goals. So while I'm reading one of the goals, I want to encourage you to press the subscribe button on YouTube. And also, if you're on Facebook, press the like button. And just to try to enlist you in some of our goals and visions, we will really want you to help us to build a society that is much more informed from all sides, a society where one can change from within so as to affect the changes on the outside, a society that can reason together, and a society that can work to keep hope alive. Our vision here at Globespan is a country where its moral and ethical compass are directed by the Word of God. And many people would say that, religion and state must be separate. But yes, to the extent where you cannot take God out of a man, and certainly, a level of separation. But I want to continue with my vision. Help build a Guyana where all Afro, Indo, Amerindians, and all races value each other as equal human beings. Imagine a Guyana where her wealth becomes your wealth. So I started off tonight's program in trying to enlist you with our goals, our visions, and hopefully you also could expand on that. I want to introduce our guest tonight, Mr. G.H.K. Lal, public advocate. I also want to be able to thank the leader of the APNU parliamentary group and businessman, Dr. Terence Campbell. He certainly has made time to be with us tonight, given the fact that he does have a full agenda ahead of him. And we have no other than Mr. Timothy Jonas, senior counsel, who has become a pillar or a foundation of Globespan, being with us for many years now, bringing in his commentary and his views. So tonight's program, I need to repeat, these views are solely of the guests and not necessarily reflect Globespan and its affiliates. I want to start off tonight with Mr. G.H.K. Lal in terms of giving his opinion and how does he interpret the new cabinets and also the new parliamentarians that would be joining the next session. Mr. GHK.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Singh, Councillor Jonas. Good to be here with you. And Dr. Campbell, here you are. You've made some time for us. We are glad to have you here. It's good to be here, and it's good that we have had an elections and now we have a cabinet. We have a couple of new faces. We have a couple of crossover faces. Maybe crossover is not the best word, but it's what I can find right now. What do I think of the new cabinet? I have said before that for the first 100 days that the president and the government is entitled to a honeymoon. And that first 100 days that was introduced by Franklin Delano Roosevelt in 1933. No. I will not second guess the president. He's entitled to his choices. Nor will I condemn any minister, any member of parliament in that list that came up. I say, let's give the people, those fellow Guyanese brothers and sisters, let's give them an opportunity for this second 5 years to put out their best works. We've heard a lot of promises on the campaign trail. We know what we all know, whether we are PPP followers or PNC followers, for or against or whatever. We know what has happened in the last 5 years. The expectations are very, very high for these 5 years going forward. Therefore, I say we start with a new slate. Some people have objected to the clean slate description because of the old faces and the baggage that they carry. But I think that I would like to say, personally, that despite my misgivings, despite some of the intelligence that I have gleaned over the years, I say let's, in a spirit of compromise, in a spirit of nobility, in a spirit of patriotism, in a spirit of working with the government and the president, he himself in a brand new 5-year span to prove, and by producing what reaches across the spectrum of the Guyanese demographic and inspire us to better things and greater things that are possible because of all the wealth that we have. So I say my position is, as much as I have some difficulty with the names that they are there, let us put that, I put that behind me and said, let's go forth.
Mr. Singh, you're on mute.
Yeah, Mr. GHK, thank you for those comments. And Dr. Terence Campbell, once again, I want to be able to express our gratitude for you to be with us here tonight. I know you have a full slate ahead of you, and you certainly many things may be going through your mind. And certainly we want to be able to get access to some of your thinking as we go forward into this next parliamentary session. As mentioned, you have your work cut out for you. You're a businessman. Your background is very different from thinking as a politician. But just a quick word of encouragement. There have been many successful businessmen who became politicians, one being in the United States right now. But one also, I'm sure you would remember men like Bloomberg, very successful. Ross Perot in the United States, basically pioneer and started out the independent movement in the US. And we have businessmen across the world, in Latin America, in Europe, that has really emerged as seasoned politicians that were very successful. So here we go with you leading the APNU slate, the 12-member team. And we pretty much would like to get some visibility of what you're thinking and what are we to expect from your leadership in APNU in the process of being in Parliament.
So Nohar, thanks for having me on. And if I never did it before, let me also thank you for allowing me to use Globespan as a platform prior to the election. I think Globespan has helped me to emerge a little bit under the public glare, and for people and voters in particular to become aware of who I am and what my positions are on different matters. And so I'm very grateful for Globespan for having given me that platform. And perhaps I would not be on the eve, so to speak, of entering Parliament, and certainly shockingly the lead of the APNU delegation if it weren't for platforms like Globespan. I guess the budding politician in me, I do not embrace with the same enthusiasm, let's give them a chance, that my friend GHK does. but I'm not all negative. I think opposition, someone said, and I don't recall who it was, that the duty of the opposition is to oppose. And I believe in Guyana's context, where we're now beneficiaries of significant wealth and income flows, especially from energy, that are going to increase over the next 5 years. It might be, I don't think it's wise for any opposition leader or group to be obstructionist to national development. So, being in opposition, one must walk a narrow rope, a narrow line, because we must support those positive areas of development. At the same time, we have a duty to keep a critical eye on government expenditure, on transparency, on accountability, on efficiency. And so we have a duty to hold the government accountable. So I think what you will see, at least from the APNU, I can't speak for the entire opposition, but certainly from the APNU, is that we will support development where it's positive. We'll support projects where the idea is good, but we will keep a close eye and question projects in terms of the execution and so on. And this is one of the reasons that I didn't completely embrace my friend GHK, because too often in the last 5 years, we've seen projects being executed in a substandard manner. And those who were in charge remain in charge. And so I come with a greater degree of skepticism and worry about the new cabinet. And I certainly, and I think the APNU team will not give them 100 days, but we will keep an eye on what is happening from day one as we go forward. But in short, look for the APNU as supporting national development whilst demanding accountability and transparency and efficiency from the government going forward.
Yeah, and thank you for that. I mean, certainly one of the tentacles of Globespan is for us to have different opinions. So, and yeah, the takeaway, you're talking about a significant wealth, but you're also talking about a cooperative approach. And certainly you will be in a position to support national development. You know, Dr. Campbell, one of the conversations I had a few weeks ago with the former president, Donald Ramutar, and he mentioned to me, but these fellas, them don't participate. They don't, I'm trying to imitate him here for a second. They don't participate in the committees that are being set up. And just to add to his comment, a comment that Timothy Jonas made on this program a few weeks ago, about a month ago, how important it is for the public to know what is going on. I want you to bridge that two together if you can for me. One, would there be a full participation in the committee? And two, given the fact that the voting process is not going to be in anyone's in New Orleans' favor, would you be able to bring the issues out to the public so the public also could have visibility of what's taking place?
So you're raising an issue that has occupied my mind a lot recently. And in fact, at 5:30 this morning, I was walking on the seawall and having a conversation with someone out on the African continent, Guyanese working there. And I said to the gentleman, I said, one of the problems for us, one of the weaknesses of proportional representation is that it has divorced the parliamentarian from the constituency. And so I am not sure that I agree. I'm taking it that former President Rambutar was speaking about the opposition. But I believe that across the board, on the government side and on the opposition side, there are MPs that simply do not pull their weight. I've taken a look at MPs from the 12th Parliament, and there's some of them whose names I don't even know. I don't recall some of them ever saying anything in Parliament or saying anything into the public domain. And so what I, as a business person, will encourage the APNU team to do is to be fully involved in Parliament, in the committees, and in constituencies, even though we don't have a first past the post system, constituencies to which they will be assigned. And being a parliamentarian gives you a platform. So even if you don't have the votes, the voting power to create change, you can use that platform to publicize issues and ventilate issues in the public domain that are important for the country. So there might be limitations in terms of voting power, but there are no limitations in terms of bringing issues to the public, having them fully ventilated and discussed, and bringing pressure to the government. Let me just give you one simple example before I don't want to take up all the oxygen on this program, but we have gone out on some social welfare missions to fire victims and so on. And within short order, the government has turned up and offered stuff. So I believe that if MPs use the public domain to ventilate issues where they are not being heard in Parliament or don't have the votes to create change in Parliament, then there is a possibility that those things will be addressed. So look for parliamentarians who are doing work in Parliament, in constituencies that will be assigned, and ventilating matters of importance frequently in the public domain.
Yeah, and you did well in bridging those two aspect of it. Timothy Jonas, to Chris Hope comment, no harm what happened to the PPP minority government. You're too biased to host this program. I think many folks, Timothy Jonas, was looking towards some sort of a minority government as a check and balance system, really not in a way of choosing what would be their preference. Given the fact now that the reality of what we have is that we have 36, 12, and I believe 16. But the leader of the opposition, he's not a seasoned politician, Timothy Jonas. He has not been on a public debate stage. And certainly I'm not sure in any way how deep his other parliamentarians are. As a person who has been actively involved in Guyana and certainly want to see the better of the nations, what are your concerns, Timothy Jonas, and what advice would you give in the situation that we have here in this composition?
Thanks, Noah. This is a good panel. It's a pleasure to be on with GHK and Terence and yourself. That is an interesting question, and it's something that's been troubling me. The fact is that the PPP has a majority in Parliament, and therefore they have control. Now, what Terence says sounds good. It's exactly what he needs to say. I hope that the leader of the opposition is saying the same thing, that they will help where they see national development taking place. And they will, at the same time, advocate for transparency and accountability. Well and good, a little bit vague. And I think it's important to figure out how to do that with your 12 seats. First of all, and I hope this has happened already, there needs to be a discussion among the three opposition folk, and I include Ms. Amanza Desir in this with her one seat, because she is obviously a capable woman and obviously has experience at this level and therefore will have insight. The three minority parties should already have had a conversation so as to figure out how to present a united position that is helpful rather than obstructionist. Now, helpful does not mean political gimmickry, and it does not mean posturing. So I'm thinking, how can they best be helpful? First, to me, we got to recognize the positives that we have seen. The truth is that for the past 5 years, the PPP government has done a lot of work in terms of infrastructural development, award of contracts, sharing the free money around through award of contracts and infrastructural development. Well and good. The large drawback has been corruption and perceptions of corruption, lack of transparency, and lack of involvement by the people on the other side. They haven't been invited to the discussion. And I think that the focus of the opposition needs to be to change those things. And the question is how to do it. The first shakeup that I saw gave me some hope. I'll give you some examples. Ms. Parag in Ministry of Education. That is a competent, fair-minded lady who can work hard and I think will work hard. And I like to see her there. Ms. Manik Chan moved from Ministry of Education, another competent lady who I think will give fresh air to the ministry that she's at now. Other shakeups, and there are ministries where the potential for corruption or the perception of corruption is high. There needed to be changes there, and I see that in some cases there have been shakeups. So the perception is good right now. I was gratified to see Mr. Nandalal remain where he was. I think he's a competent lawyer, and I think he did a fair job as Minister of Legal Affairs. So there are some ups. There were also some major problems, and we saw some politicians who were not wealthy 5 years ago become very wealthy, and there needed to be a shakeup to change that at a political level. What I'd like to see the members of the opposition do is approach the government with that very tone that Terence is taking, that we want to be part of national development. We want to help where we can. And to suggest that in terms of transparency and accountability, that the government agree to install nominees by the opposition, so people nominated by the opposition, in the various institutions where decisions are made. That is the only way for transparency. They don't need to have the swing vote. They don't need to have majority in those places. But if they are there, first of all, they can lend whatever experience they have. Second of all, they can scrutinize. And that will curb any free fall of corruption and any secret deals. But the GRDB, the Guy Oil Board, GPL, the Energy Agency, it's one thing to talk about parliamentary committees where you send some bill to discuss. That's well and good. But I would like to see opposition members involved in the procurement committees, I'd like to see one on the board of NISIL, for example. I'd like to see opposition folk in central housing, dealing with allocation of land and award of contracts, in drainage and irrigation. Just one member in each. And if an approach could be made to the government publicly to say we want to help and we believe that this is important for transparency and accountability, these are the suggestions we want to make.
Yeah.
Allow us to be there. I think that's the first step that nobody can really quarrel with. I don't think it'll work, but if it doesn't work, that will also say a lot.
Yeah.
It has to be done in recognition that the government is, in fact, doing a great deal in terms of awarding contracts. The issue is lack of transparency and lack of accountability and lack of fiscal management.
Yeah. Thank
If
you,
I see
Tim.
that as a first step, I think that a lot can happen. We're talking about decentralization and the local government elections. That is something else that needs to be discussed to decentralize financial power to those institutions so that they can micromanage in the areas that they are in.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Tim. Thanks, Rem. So, just a few takeaway from Tim's comment. He commended the positive that you have seen in terms of what, from his standpoint, the changes within the political realm of the PPP. He talked about meeting of the minds and participation at many different levels. Mr. Joseph Prasad message, Mr. Mohammed should have been invited to share his views as the main opposition. Mr. Prasad, I just want you to know that Mr. Mohammed was invited several times during the election campaign through one of his associates. My invitation did not go out directly to him, but through his associate. And he didn't make time to be in the program. We did reach out to his associate to be on this program tonight, not Mohammed, his associate, and he declined, being that they have quite a lot to on their hands. So I just want you to know we are reaching out, Mr. Prasad, and we'll continue to reach out to all the political parties, because I think some of the important factors that came out of all three of these distinguished gentlemen comments is the commonality in how important it is for everyone to work towards building a nation. Mr. GHK, just a couple of things on what transpired prior to the election. One of the very important one to many people is the information. And I believe the Vice President did say there will be changes where information will be more forthcoming. And that's one. Two, in addition to that, there's been a slew of announcements also that came after the inauguration. A lot of it is digitalization, the electronic portal, quite a bit of announcements. So if you want to touch a little to some of the commitments that were made leading up to election and some of the commitments that are being made now for the next 100 days or for the rest of this year. Go ahead, Mr. GHK.
I'm sorry, but you froze on the screen and I lost you for a while, and then the system rebooted. Could you start over, please? I'm sorry about that.
Just a couple of points on, what commitments were made prior to the election or E-Day. That is one important one to many of the folks out there is the Information Act in terms of getting accessibility to information. I believe the Vice President made a commitment to that extent. There were other commitments of looking into the way of how business transactions are being done by specific sector of the business community in terms of how they're reporting upwards. A couple of those points of commitments that were made prior to E-Day, and then post E-Day, we've had a slew of announcements coming in from the president, who, by the way, from the opening gates, started to make some really, noticeable announcements, which are very much more positive towards increasing the standard of living. So if you want to comment on both, if you don't mind.
Yes, thank you again. Prior to the elections, we had all these promises. Well, now it's the time. Now it's the time to produce. Now it's the time for the government to perform. Now it's the time for the president and his cabinet, his team, to make good on all of what was specified, identified in his second inaugural address. There he is. And, there were I don't think there was any great oratory, but there were some flashpoints that took some wing. Now, let's go back before the elections. Access to information I can speak profusely about because I was on the street in front of the office of the commissioner. I was in front of the office of the president for, a number of occasions. I think I missed one. And why should we be picketing, protesting for access to information that is permissible by law, a law that is now, I think, some 14 years old. It was certainly heartening to hear the Vice President say, maybe several weeks before actual September 1st, that yes, there will be some access to information when we've got to look at that and we intend to address it, intend to address that. That is encouraging. Now we need to see what is going to happen there. In terms of money, I mean, all the parties, including Dr. Campbell's, came up with numbers and said, we are going to do this, we are going to do that. And clearly, the cost of living, which is a killer matter for the poor in this country, has got to be addressed. And I don't know that it has to wait for a budget, which is a half a year away, before that process is completed. I think that the expectation right now is for something to happen between now and Christmas. I can tell you that's bubbling up from the ground. It certainly is timely that today, in today's media, I read of the e-card, the EID card, is going to be ready and available come by the end of this month. Now, that's a good thing. Is that part of the preparation for targeted relief for Guyanese who really need that? One of the things that led to the low voter turnout, in my estimation, was that some approximately 50% of the electorate, from what I'm gathering, stayed away. It was a silent protest, but it was a pretty conspicuous one that says, we don't trust you, we don't want to hear from you, or we don't care what you say that you're going to do, because you've had 5 years to do that and you didn't do anything. Frankly, and with due respect to you, Dr. Campbell, I think the opposition was a no-show in the electoral campaign, and that too was not to its favor, to its credit, but that is gone. The government now has this, I think it's 7-seat majority, and it did a lot of things with 1 seat. Here it is that it can make good on some of those promises. Access to information is 1, cost of living is 2, and I think something could be done between now and November, December. That's the expectation out there. In terms of the police, something has to be done there with the police so that we can build confidence. And I hear the new Minister of Home Affairs, pretty new to that portfolio, saying that that's one of her priorities, that she wants to have a police force that Guyanese can take some confidence in. Relative to the president's second inaugural address, he went into some areas that are pretty close to me. He said that we are going to have an anti-corruption squad. Now, that's music to my ears, but the question is, who is going to put in charge of that? Before we heard, where is the evidence of corruption? We heard that for about 4 years. And then we heard that corruption is not that big of a deal. Well, apparently it's quite big of a deal, because if you've got to have an anti-corruption squad, something is flaring and glaring there. And so the president has come up with that. Incidentally, I think that the new minister of what's that thing again? Public service efficiency and implementation. I think that has some relation to that anti-corruption business. Because if you're talking about efficiency and implementation in projects, and you're inserting the words best practices there, what is that telling me? That from the evaluation criteria being kept to the tender board being held accountable, to procurement being given a greater intensity of focus, that there is some strength being put there. And I think that's a good thing. As to whether this is going to be just for the show of it, I don't know. Again, as I said, I am giving the president and the government the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to the extreme here, gentlemen, and my fellow Guyanese, and I'm going to stand by that. And I hear you, Dr. Campbell. Yes, there'll be some muted criticism. I had to do that today in the media because less than 2 weeks after the inauguration, the Reporters Sans Frontières, RSF, said, these are the things that you need to improve upon in your dealings with the media. And there is the president, there is the government excluding Stabroek News, Prime News, Capital News, and other news outfit from his very, very first news press conference. I think that's not a good thing at all because it
Yeah.
sends the wrong message. And it says, I hear Dr. Campbell saying, we want to cooperate. We want to be a part of the conversation. And yet there is this brush of the hand or the back of the
Yeah.
hand that says we don't want to do we're going to deal with you. However, I mean, 5 years ago, for 5 years, this was the norm. We've got a new 5 year period in front of us. Let us make my exhortation to the government. Let's make the use of it. I may be talking to myself, I may be talking in the wind, but the fact of the matter is that let us start out in good faith and let's not just talk for the sake of talking. The president, forget about his record in
Yeah.
that respect.
Okay.
He has said now he must ensure that what he has said, he will make good on it. And I don't think he started well with excluding certain sections of the media, particularly the independent media from there. So money, access to information, which goes to transparency, anti-corruption, which goes to procurement and tendering and projects and infrastructure and all those wonderful things that we're seeing and we've been talking about that are part of the oil wealth. And I think if the government is serious, it can get somewhere. If it is listening to what the low voter turnout is saying, it should really get wise, it should wise up and respond accordingly.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. GHK. And just a pause for a second. We picked this up from Newsroom, and a report that came in, a Guyanese-born educator, Miss Crystal Ashwood, was recently recognized at New York City inaugural Excellence in Human Service Delivery Awards by Mayor Eric Adams. Ms. Ashwood, a proud Guyanese American professional, was spotlighted among this year's honorees for her exceptional commitment to community service and innovation within the human service sector. My fellow Guyanese, what does this have to do with the program? To my point, what I'm trying to do is to point out Guyanese excellence throughout the world, how much they have been able to achieve outside of Guyana, and how much more we could be able to achieve within Guyana. So from here on, Globespan will try to point out if you do have anyone that we would love to recognize, please email support@globespan247. It is important for us to be able to recognize the positive contribution of Guyanese throughout the world, and that has been ongoing. Dr. Terence Campbell, Mr. GHK mentioned quite a bit. I want to see if you could narrow down into immediate improvement for our fellow Guyanese, their standard of living. What's in that area, an agenda that you would probably be able to table in Parliament that could immediately within this 100 days? The president is being held to 100 days, so we are not flipping the coin and saying we want to hold you to the 100 days. And what would you be able to table in Parliament to be able to increase the standard of living for Guyanese?
So, Noir, GHK gave us quite a tour. He touched on almost every area of responsibility within the cabinet. Let me just before I deal with cost of living issues, bread and butter issues. I know Tim mentioned representation on boards, and he did say procurement boards in passing. He did touch on it, but I just want to say that that's perhaps one of the most important boards, and I would have thought he probably could have ranked as the very first thing that he mentioned, opposition representation on the National Procurement and Tender Administration Board, because even though there is opposition representation on the Public Procurement Commission. Very often that commission will say they can't do anything about, what has happened within, and the Bellevue pump station is one such example. So I agree with Tim, and I think very important. All of the boards that he mentioned are important, but I would have highlighted the MPTAB as a priority. The APNU NOAR had a number of proposals to bring some relief to our population, for whom the World Bank says close to 50% live in a state of poverty. Noah, I have been out in the fields and I have seen real poverty right here in Georgetown, absolute poverty. And we need to have an improved social safety net. And amongst the proposals that we had advanced were an increased minimum wage, increased old age pension. I think it's currently 41,000. The PPP wants to move it to 60,000, but I think that's inadequate at this point in time. We were going to remove PAYE if the person was earning under 400,000. So we will sit as, hopefully in the first instance, as an APNU parliamentary team, and in the second instance as a wider opposition team, because there are limitations on the number of bills that we are allowed to advance, and some types of bills we can't advance. So we will have to sit together. I think it'll be premature for me to say exactly in terms of bringing relief to the people of Guyana, especially those married in poverty. It would be premature for me to say exactly what will be tabled, because that goes beyond even an APNU discussion and goes into strategically into wider opposition discussion. And if there is maturity, it even goes into a discussion with the government. But whilst we are on the subject of legislative agenda, there are a number of things that, let me just take a sidebar quickly to say that we'll be looking at an electoral reform, especially with the LGE coming up, biometrics, which for some reason the GCOM has doggedly avoided, campaign finance reform, the budgets allocated to the regions, opposition representation, access to information, and so on. These are some of the things that I believe will be on the agenda for the opposition, even outside. But at the top of the agenda will be bringing relief to those, the poor amongst us. Respectfully, I want to point out to my brother GHK that he can't have his cake and eat it. And the last time I said this about a politician, I got into trouble. He's willing tonight to give the government, some space in the first 100 days. But he also pointed out the ominous signs that are there, that they don't deserve that space, with the president setting restrictions on the number of questions and setting restrictions on which media houses are being invited to. And it's not often that the president holds a press conference, and he decides to hold one and restricts questions and restricts media houses. So I want to point out to my brother that there's a bit contradictory. I question him giving them the space for 100 days when the signs are there very, very early that they don't deserve 100 days space. We need to be holding them accountable, holding their feet to the fire from now. Just two quick things. Police, if I could just run some of the things that he mentioned. Let's say police and corruption. The reports about corruption and I would say circumstantial evidence, I don't know if Tim would criticize me for using that term, point to corruption in the highest offices of the land. And how do we reverse that? You know, is it? I think those highest offices would have to come clean. They'll have to become Catholics like myself and GHK and go to confession. That, you know, just appointing a czar somewhere down below is not going to reverse the issue of corruption. And the police force has been, you know, kudos to the new minister for wanting to bring about change. But the police force has been deliberately, they've put their own people, the PPP government has put its own people in places to achieve what it wants, political control of the police force, often for political purposes. And I don't see it, you know, the new minister being able to given a free hand to make the changes that would be necessary in order to bring about a police force that's more responsive to citizens, that is truly a servant to the citizens of this country. So I got a healthy dose of skepticism about these things. But back to your question, we will discuss as an opposition, as an APNU opposition, as a wide opposition, and maybe even engage the government in sidebars when we're not throwing barbs at each other. What can we do for the people of Guyana? Because they're suffering at this point in time.
Yeah. Yeah, and for a split second there, you really truly put on your opposition hat, ready to take away the 100 days that GHK was giving to them. But
Could I say a word here, please? Nohar, could I say a
sure,
word, please? Quick second.
sure.
My brother, Dr. Campbell, spoke in true opposition form as an opposition parliamentary leader, and I commend him for that. I'm speaking as a civil society, as a servant of the people. So, and I like that title, servant of the people. Mr. Jonas may think differently, but the fact is, 100 days is not all or none. So, if something is egregious, yes, I hear about cake and bake and all of that. But if something is egregious, sticks out, then I will comment on it and say, I am disappointed in this, which I've done. Whereas before, I could have said, well, what the hell is going on here? You say you're going to do A, B, and C, and you've already reversed, walked back where you are. So even the tone is tempered at this time so to give these people a free hand and say, yes, we'll prove that we deserve this, or you know what, we're going down the same road as before, and we don't care what anybody says.
Tim, I'm trying to put this in the context of 36 seats. 36 seats, you table a bill, you're going to pass it if that's what you want. We have an opposition, one that may be not a seasoned, but we do have a seasoned businessman within the APNU folks. I asked the question about how is it that we could start addressing the standard of living for the Guyanese folks. How can civil society engage in a discourse in the public domain that could affect and influence not only the opposition parliamentarians, but also the government, so that they can be able to make the priorities? I know we have corruption, talks about corruption. We have a lot of problems, Tim, but somehow we have to be able to prioritize those problems. I don't know if you picked up the Guardian newspaper from England, and I was going to bring that into the program, but there's just so many things I couldn't bring in. Talked about, Guyana hit oil 10 years ago, but why are the people still poor? And this is a British newspaper. So how does civil society, people that are on the public domain, affect the thinking pattern for not only the opposition, but also the government, so it benefits the people of Guyana?
Nohar, you laugh at me sometimes for pessimism, and you may do so this time as well. Civic society in Guyana either is blindly loyal or they're part of the problem. One of the reasons that, all right, let me give you an example. Terence raises a good point, minimum wage. The reason that the Guyanese in the villages have traditionally, until this election, when the PNC was so hopeless that their core supporters walked away. But they have just voted blindly, or they always voted. And one of the reasons for that is lack of education and poverty. It takes someone whose horizons have been broadened by a good education and who has the backing of a structured family, a good middle class arrangement, to be able to really and informatively critique the leaders. Now, if you keep your people poor, you keep them loyal. It is a vicious cycle. And if you look at the people in government, the people in opposition, who have been criticizing, who have been trying to make a change, you find it's people like Terrence, people who are educated, have risen, have made some money, and have the perception, have the depth of knowledge to realize that some things can be changed at a systemic level. So, first of all, the government has to have the appetite to improve the quality of life and standard of living of its subjects, knowing that there's danger in that, because suddenly your electorate will be asking you hard questions. There are not very many people asking hard questions. On your own program, you've just commented on some statements made by your viewers. They're quarreling with you because they have already taken an aligned position and they just don't want to hear another point of view. For that to change, there has got to be improved education, improved access to education. People have to sit down with some amount of dignity, able to engage with the people that don't look like them. And our civic society doesn't do that. They continue to pay low wages. They fight against any effort to increase minimum wages. They don't pay NIS for their employees. They don't pay PAYE for their employees. They don't pay their own taxes. They are happy to inveigle with favors and bribes to obtain what they want. That is the culture. So the culture has to be changed at a governmental and opposition and parliamentary level. I don't have any hope if you want to place reliance on civic society. And I'm sorry to say that, but it is the way I've seen it and the way I've seen it play out.
No, I think, go ahead.
Now, the reason that I support the government's approach with the electronic ID cards is I believe that that is a first step to bring everybody into the radar. If there is a central database that has your information, where you work, what your income is, then everything with what you own, what you drive, your driver's license, your tax ID, suddenly there is ease of access to ensure fairness, to ensure that the very wealthy are paying their fair share. Because it's one thing to say, okay, don't charge PAYE, don't charge income tax to people who are earning $300,000 or less. But you have to counterbalance that to ensure that people who are earning $30 million and more are paying their fair share. And very few of them are. So there has to be a counterbalance. There has to be accountability. And the appetite for that has to exist at the government and parliamentarian level. And it doesn't. Every last one of those parliamentarians going into parliament there are going to immediately apply for duty-free concession for the vehicles that no other Guyanese can afford, and are going to be using it happily, relying on laws that they pass, but that don't apply to them. That is the first step. So I would confront all of them, and I would say to them, pass a law that says that no parliamentarian and no family member of a parliamentarian can be exempt or excused from any tax regime, so that you pay the taxes that you legislate the rest of us have to pay. And immediately we'll get fair taxes. Until we can broach the subject at that level, we will continue to have problems, and we will not find a solution at the level of civic society that are trying to get favors so that they could get the same tax exemption that the parliamentarians have given themselves. It is at that basic level of self-interest that we're failing.
Yeah. And never sit out text in well-spoken Jonas, keep the poor. I suppose what he's trying to say is that trying to keep them poor. You know, Tim, one of the things I want to tell our viewers is that I don't, when Tim brings out the reality of what takes place in Guyana, and he constructed as being a pessimist, and many times I would jump in and sort of disagree. It's not because I'm disagreeing that he's not speaking the facts. He is speaking the fact. What I try to do to all of is to basically try to be able to call forth what is not as though it is, and Mr. GHK is probably going to identify what it is somehow try to bring in a different dimension so we could hope for better. Tim just laid the platform though for my next segment that I want to bring in. He spoke about in the context of what's taking place in Guyana. But what is taking place in Guyana is no longer within the confines of Guyana. I mentioned just now about the Guardian newspaper out in the UK talking about the people still being poor in Guyana. We have seen the CIA director, the Secretary of State. We've seen so many activities from the international communities as it relates to Guyana. So the effect of change, even though it may not be so evident within Guyana itself, it can come from the diaspora, it could come from the international community. And that kind of laid the segment for me to go into this next part of it. And that's the Charlie Kirk assassination. Now, this is a slight diversion, but it will lead us back into Guyana. Bear with me on this, right? Devin, do you have that video on Charlie Kirk?
So we try to become what college campuses should be.
Equal, like let you speak.
It should be an open marketplace of ideas. And you could see, again, we have hundreds of hours to demonstrate this and prove this, to respond or to clarify or agree or find clarity over agreement, which is another Prager quote. And so I think that's super healthy. And not only that, it allows people to find out what they really believe, and it challenges lies that they might be living under.
So for those of you folks who are not familiar with, and I'm sure everyone on this program here is familiar with Charlie Kirk, he basically, most of his meetings are in the college campus, and he's trying to bring the forefront the importance of dialogues. And one of the statements he's made, absent of speaking with each other, is a vacuum for violence and abuse to set in. And I really want you to know that from this assassination has given rise to quite a bit of dialogue within the mainstream America, to the extent where two senators from Pennsylvania, Senator Dave McCormick and also John Fetterman, they contact Brett Breyer at Fox News and offer themselves up. One is Republican, one is Democrat, so that they can be able to discuss how necessary it is for a nation to engage in a political discourse without resorting to violence. The senators were stressing the importance of disagreeing with each other. And as a matter of fact, Senator John Fetterman was campaigning against Dave McCormick. Now, I'm saying this in the backdrop of what's happening in Guyana, that if it is that we are so highly influenced from the outside, here are certain events that could also shape us within Guyana, so that we, and I'm talking now within the context of Globespan, have been trying to bring this dialogue in from all different sides. We've been trying to be able to have different point of views. And here is a situation with Charlie Kirk, and God bless his family, our condolences to them. And certainly it's an event that should have never took place, but it's the reality of when you don't have dialogue and you don't have the difference of opinion or discussion among the different political viewpoints, it can end up to a vacuum where people can be penalized or victimized. So Devin, just go to that other video that I have there, and I'm bringing it back to Guyana now, if you guys don't mind.
Them celebrate, win, PPP win, And then they put the whole dam up and down, and then they molest people and tell people like anything what they feel like because they're a PPP.
Dr. Terence Campbell, that last video with that incident with that very unfortunate woman, be it a WIN supporter or PPP supporter, don't matter which side she supported, and then also the indigenous folks being left stranded out there on the way to a meeting. I mean, these are the type of incidents could spiral downwards, and I'm sure everyone is familiar with the incident with Brian Max and Critic. You being now a new entrant in the political scene, what can you do or what voice can you have to help to heal a nation and to bring about some sort of a reasoning among each other that while the political differences may exist, doesn't necessarily mean that we need to victimize anyone for their beliefs. And certainly, how could we call on the leaders of this country to condemn and even go to the extent of investigating incidents like these? Dr. Campbell?
So Nohar, first of all, I do not recall any senior government official distancing themselves from any of the two incidents. Let me also say that the second incident with the bus putting out the indigenous people in the middle of nowhere, the owner of that bus service, they're not unfamiliar to me. I actually used them to transport 40-something people when it was my 60th birthday, up to Lethem, to Bonfim, to Boa Vista, and so on. And these are good business people. And I was shocked, absolutely shocked, that everybody who was on that trip with me, or most of the people who were on that trip with me, who heard about this, were shocked by the behavior. It's not the individuals, it's not the management that we came to know and appreciate. And it shows how corrosive, to my mind, our political process and our politicians have become. The way to correct this, and I think for people, being a member of parliament gives you a platform. And it gives you a platform to speak to matters like this. If, the press will pay attention. I intend to use my platform to speak to issues, or this new platform to speak to issues like this. I've always been speaking to them, but I guess being a member of parliament will improve that platform. It's higher and more visible. And I will also speak publicly to those in the government benches and privately to them for us to bring about really a new Guyanese civilization. And Noir, if we were to go back to the last parliament, the way I recall it, it was the dildo parliament. That's what I think of it, where behavior and conversation sunk to an all-time low. So I think parliamentarians in this new parliament, I hope that both sides commit to a higher standard of behavior to increase civility, and that when incidents like this take place, that leaders will say, do not do that in my name, because that is what has been missing. In
And yeah,
in the bus case, 1 second, Noah. In the case of the bus driver, there is audio evidence that he had been called by a specific businessman and told to operate in this way. And the government, that businessman, between, I would say, January and September, was involved in so many notorious incidents. And I've never seen those senior in the PPP government come out and say he's not doing that in our name and he needs to stop. Never was it done. And that's the
yeah,
difference that I would like to see. You know, my brother GHK talks about a clean slate and not a new slate. Well, with this clean slate, I'd like to see a commitment from those on both sides of the aisle to speak to their supporters and to say, when incidents like this arise, you are not to do that in my name.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And Mr. J. Barrett wrote, so Nohar, why are you sure that? You think PPP told them to do that? No, Mr. Barrett, that's not my point. My point is exactly what Dr. Terence Campbell addressed, is that everyone should be able to talk out. It doesn't matter if you're PPP, PNC, APNU. And to my point, what I'm trying to say, Mr. Barrett, is that if we're going to be building a new nation, there's certain level that we would have to set as our bar. And I showed the Charlie Kirk incident mainly to show how far deep down we could spiral downwards, so that it's not to point fingers who give the orders or not, but rather setting the standard of where we should be. We are a new country now. You know, the world, as Dr. Terence Campbell mentioned early in the program, the eyes throughout the world is on us, Mr. Barrett. And certainly Guyanese have set a standard internationally in making great accomplishment, and we should too, as a country as a whole. So being reproached in this area is not something. That Mr. GHK, I want to come to you for a second, but just pause. I just need to make another announcement here. This announcement is regarding 22 reading plans that Pastor Lisa Singh wrote in the Bible app. And of last month, the total amount of people that download her plans are 2,253,336. The total folks who completely read the plans they downloaded exceed 1,555,548. And one of her very popular plan, these are small reading plans that's on the Bible app. It says, "Don't look back." And one of the things about us in Guyana is that we look back to what the British left us in, we're not taking responsibility. We spend so much time looking into the past and we're not carving a new way forward. And that's one of my points of bringing this up. And of course, she wrote 4 books, and one of her books was Words They Become You. Now, within the Guyanese discourse, you would find so many negative views coming out all the time, and something that I would like to encourage all of our Guyanese people to change and start to prophesize and speak positiveness. Anyway, I want 2 reasons why I brought that up. One, I wanted to give Miss Pastor Lisa Singh a plug. And 2, I wanted to say how important it is for us not to stay in the past and look towards speaking positiveness over our nation. Mr. GHK, just coming back to the discussion, how could we heal the nation? How could we be able to lift the standard up so that we as Guyanese could be respected throughout the world, not only politically, but also in our economic health and every aspect?
Well, first of all, we've got to acknowledge that we are in need of healing, that we are sick. I don't think that I hear our leaders admitting that enough. We are in need of healing. We've got to stop talking to one another, around one another, above one another, and start talking with each other. We're not doing that. I am particularly gratified to hear Dr. Campbell on this program saying we. both sides of the aisle. And this should happen on both, as opposed to the government, or the PPP, the PPP. And I say to the people viewing and listening to this program, not because I say so or any panelists on this program says, that automatically the classification of your anti-PPP hits the airwaves and it never leaves that. Surely our mentality is bigger than that. We are talking about democracy, but have we lost our humanity? Clearly, we are searching for integrity. And I don't mean to be lyrical about that. The point is, what is our environment saying to us? You've brought up Charlie Kirk, and you've mentioned some incidents here, including those videos there. And I'm saying to myself, I mean, I read about those things. I haven't seen them. I didn't see the actual video. And is this what we have come to? Is this what our politics brought us to? Is this what self-determination is about? Then for every election, we have got to have a swarm of international observers because we can't count for ourselves, because we can't spell for ourselves, because we need our hands to be held. A child dies and we have to get an autopsy from overseas because we don't trust each other. And how do we start doing that? So we pound each other and we dig each other's eyes out, and we are pleased about that. And social media, digital dementia has taken hold of us, and we love it. I am saying that you do not need, and I hear you, Mr. Jonas, a superior education. What you need is a superior heart. What you need is a superior training from boy up. Poor family, forlorn family, family with nothing much, from some rustic area. We have had boys and girls who have risen and gone out into the world and have done magnificently. Why is it that we can't do this here? We are in New Guyana. When that oil cape was discovered, when that oil started to ship, we are no longer the Guyana of old, of the 1960s. This is a new era in Guyana. And unless we adapt to it, unless our mentality changes, then the dinners that belong to us will be ate by those cats that come from overseas. Yes, I've twisted that around a little bit. Here's the story. We have got to stop looking at a man and see a black man or an Indian man or an indigenous man or woman. We have got to see a human being. We've got to see a fellow citizen. We've got to see a fellow patriot. We've got to see somebody who means best for this country. And therefore, we've got to tone it down in terms of all we see is an enemy. And that's what we do. We don't see an adversary. We see an enemy. And I think that unless that mentality is changed, we are going to be stuck where we are to our detriment. We need to start looking at life. Our leaders need to take the lead in that. I agree with you, Dr. Campbell. I want to hear the president. I want to hear the vice president saying, we are not a part of that. That is not going to happen under my watch. And it better be the last time that it has. And because this happened, this is what is going to happen. There will be consequences, but we are not getting that. I would like, if that starts, the fish rots from the head, and the fish also can be aromatic from the head. And I would like for us to stop the rot and begin with that, where the leaders lead, set the example, set the standard, and then the followers will fall into line. You will get some outliers and some radicals, but the followers will, both on the PNC side, the WIN side, and the PPP side. Moreover, because the PPP is the government, it's got to take the lead here.
And Mr. GHK, you'll be happy to hear this person who posted this named themselves First Depth. And so First Depth posted, and hopefully we see a better example being set by those Thursday press conference by the Vice President. So I guess you're calling on the leaders, and there are commentators saying the same thing, calling on the leaders to comment in these areas. Tim, some advice for Globespan. These incidents has happened. These are very innocent people. I mean, when I look at those indigenous people, my heart goes out to them. My heart goes out to this very poor lady out in the area. It's a vexation not only to the spirit, but it's also hitting the core of a human being. But yet, Globespan is to bring this up as saying, look, we need to look at a higher level, set a standard. And the barrage of comment that would come in, Mohammed paid no harm, you're going down a terrible path, this is hate no harm, you're blaming PPP. What advice, Timothy Jonas, you have? You're a wise guy, you're well experienced for Globespan and guys like Nohar, that how do they bring out, what is not right? It's just not right, Tim. How do we bring this out without being barraged like this?
It's funny, the example you just gave, I think, is perfect because it's symptomatic of what is wrong with us as a society. And I think the responses by Terence and GHK, in turn, showed the other aspect of what's wrong with our society and a misdirection in the cure. GHK said we're sick, definitely. We're sick because we abuse our children. Child abuse is rampant. We beat them until questions of right and wrong and morality become irrelevant, and the only thing that exists is fear and oppression. And that is not the space that a human being can grow in with self-respect and dignity so as to be a good, fair-minded member of society. So it starts there. Where GHK went wrong, in my view, is that he then went politically correct. He said it's not about education. There are people that come from humble backgrounds that do it very well. Of course, that's true. The best example I could think of is Robert Badal, an extraordinary Guyanese businessman and citizen who came from very humble backgrounds in Mara on the Berbice River. But the exception doesn't prove the rule. It takes an extraordinary person to rise above a background of oppression and poverty and to do something proper. Whereas your average Joe, who has a background that helps, who goes to a good school, who has a stable environment, he doesn't have to be extraordinary. He can be average, and he will have the luxury of becoming a model citizen. So the exception doesn't prove the rule, and we have to understand that it is the religious structures, the family structures, the institutions like church and school that need to be stable, need to be organized, and we have to stop the oppression of our children so that they can grow up with dignity and the expectation of fairness, so that they, in turn, when they get power, can do fairness. We don't do that. So what we have now is fear. And the converse of fear is cowardice. Because if you're in power, just like the planters of old, you beat your slaves. That hasn't changed culturally in this country. Look at how employers treat their employees. Look at how teachers beat children in school. Parents beat children. Husbands beat wives. It hasn't changed. It is a culture of fear. And the people who are oppressed are cowards. They are cowards necessarily. It is not a criticism of them. They are cowards because they have no way to fight back, because that is our oppressive society. And the error I think that Terence made, he describes those people that run the bus company as good people. It's easy to be good people when the sun is shining and things are easy. But that is not when your character is tested. The test of your character is when there is danger, when there's a risk. Do you run and hide and scurry and every man for himself? Or do you recognize that we are all humans and right is right and wrong is wrong? So that when you get a phone call from some irrational tyrant, do you duck and cower? And do you put a woman and a baby out in the middle of the savannah and expect that people will still say, oh, you're a good person? Or do you have the character in the face of adversity, which is when your character is to be judged, not in good weather, to say, I will do the right thing. Because for me, I'm sorry, I'm not forgiving. If you do not have the character, and I cannot depend on you when things are hard and you go running away, then I wash my hands. Character is shown in adversity, and there is nothing to forgive when a man puts a woman out on the savannah. And I want to respond to your Mr. Barrett, who made his comment. Nobody here mentioned PPP in that review of the savannah. But he doth protest too much, because the whole country knows that that bus was carrying WIN supporters to a rally. That is what was said. It was what was admitted. So who else, other than somebody who did not want them to reach the rally, who else had the motive? And we know who it was. Now, this is the truth. The truth is, I don't believe anybody in the upper echelons of the PPP would countenance doing something like that. It was inhumane. But what you see in a system, and what you see in a corporate structure, and what you see in a family structure, is that at the mid-level management is where the abuse happens. And the responsibility of the people at the top is to call it out, even if it is by their supporters, and to say, we apologize, this should never have happened, we condemn it. And there was absolute silence on that particular incident. And that is what Mr. Barrett needs to understand. Mr. Barrett, happily, in his blind happiness to be loyal, does not think about the woman and her child in the savannah. He got into politics, but he needs to ask himself, was that right? Was it acceptable? And given the motivation for that inhumane act, does he expect the people that he's blindly following to stay silent, or would he expect them, as people of character, people of reputation, to say, I condemn that, it was wrong?
And Tim, I couldn't put it better. You put it precisely. The point I was trying to bring out to Mr. Barrett and all the viewers, it's not about the political party, it's about the incident itself that definitely should not be condoned, as a matter of fact, be spoken out against. I really want to thank Mr. Rohan Jorawar, and Mr. Rohan typed, nice program, no harm, because it's always so good to get the positive comments to come in as well. I went to a wedding over the weekend, 2 weekends ago, and so many people came up to me and said, look, you really need to keep Globespan. And people who I didn't even know would look at Globespan, living out in Florida and other different states, and they were saying that, yes, we do look at Globespan and how important it is for you to keep Globespan going, because it brings in the views from all sides. And I even received a call today from one of the political actors in Guyana who said that it's such an important program, and a lot of folks go back and look at the programs over the weekend. So it's an effort, Tim, and then certainly I want to be able to stand with the people of Guyana, especially when advantage is being taken over them. Dr. Terence Campbell, we started this program about you have your task set out for you, and we're looking at you because you do have experience both in the private sector and now putting your feet into the political arena. There's a lot of negativity coming in, Dr. Campbell. If I could leave you with some word of hope here. A lot of negativity coming in, comments about the different changes, the resignations within APNO and the PNC, etc., etc. But just to give you, a word of encouragement, I mean, and this is biblical, it clearly states, God clearly stated that you cannot pour new wine in old wineskin. So with all the changes that are taking place, it may end up to be we all will look forward for it to be a better team, a much more stronger opposition, because if I am a PPP supporter, I want to be able to make sure that the PPP function to the utmost best for the people, for all the people of Guyana. So therefore, one of the mechanisms for that to happen, Dr. Campbell, would be a strong opposition. So in saying that to you, I'm going to ask you very close. I had so many other questions. I had the litany of a list that President Ali mentioned. electronic platform, online passport, digitalization citizen, police clearance, birth certificate, and that's tons of stuff I wanted to get into, but we couldn't, running out of time. So I'm going to ask you for your closing comments. And again, I want to leave you, of course, and I really want to thank you for making the time to be with us tonight. So go ahead, Dr. Campbell.
Thanks for raising the issue of the departures from the APNU. You know, the reality is that the APNU, this has been its worst showing, APNU or its predecessor, the PNC. It's been its worst showing in elections from the time it was started. And unfortunately, in Guyana, economic opportunity, a lot of economic opportunity is tied to the government of the day. Jobs, even the private sector, a lot of the private sector is tied to the government of the day via contracts. And so I can tell you, since my entry in the political domain, active politics, the number of people that I have met that have not worked for 5 years simply because they've been politically excluded. And so I'm saying there are a variety of reasons. Some people assume that every time you see a departure from the APNU, they assume the reasons. But I'm saying also sometimes it's just frustration that, hey, for the next 5 years, I'm going to be locked out of economic opportunity simply because I'm a PNC member or an APNU supporter. And that is something that needs to change in Guyana. My last words as we come to the end of this program are directed towards you, towards the three of you, and in fact, all Guyanese, that as I get ready to enter that National Assembly, I hope that I will carry Tim's desire for accountability throughout the government. The things that he had hoped that he would get via a minority government, that I would carry your desire for increased civility amongst Guyanese, especially in our political discourse. And I think that is also a desire that's shared by GHK for honesty, accountability, and transparency. I hope I'll be able to carry and speak out firmly and courageously for those values that you three gentlemen stand for, and that for which Globespan sees as its reason for existence. Keep me in your prayers.
Well said, well said. And just some positive notes again. First Dep posted, second great program, much appreciated. Well, Rum Wilkins Slime, Rum Sucker. Tim, I'm not sure how much you would appreciate this comment, but here he is saying, I find Mr. Jonas to be fair 90% of the time. So maybe you take another drink, you probably get to 100%. Yeah, so we do have folks that really do appreciate the Globespan effort. And again, we don't want to take a side. We want to be able to bring in a discussion from all aspects. We do invite PPP members. None was invited for this program in tonight. We wanted to give that to Terrence Campbell, an opportunity to express his efforts that he's going to be undertaking. But we will be inviting PPP. We will be inviting Win and Miss Amanza. Definitely, Tim was very instrumental in bringing her up early into the program. Globespan will continue onwards. Mr. GHK, your closing comments, please.
If Guyana is going to get the best out of what it has been blessed with, we have to be at our best. we who are on these types of programs, we who write in the newspapers, we who contribute to the thought processes, to the visions and the dreams that this country can represent, we who are leaders, who have been elected to be leaders and selected to be leaders, and every Guyanese, listening or not listening to this program or watching it or not, we have a role to play. And if we want a better Guyana, then we ourselves have to be better. All those things we talked about, humanity, decency, integrity, honesty, if we can have fractions more of those, think of what better place Guyana will be. Dr. Campbell, all the best to you in your new life. Mr. Jonas, to both of you, it's been my pleasure sharing here tonight.
Mr. Jonas, two things that will put a smile on your face. One is Miss Yasmin Khan said, "Thank you, Mr. Jonas. I feel that pain for that woman and her baby." I bet she's referring, and yeah, that was very obvious, the indigenous situation. The next thing I will put a little smile on your face is that, Mr. Senior Counsel, call forth what is not as though it is, sir.
Thank you, Noah. I want to direct this at Terrence, actually, and to make the suggestion that every proposal that is put to the government, so every separate proposal that is put, should be put publicly, notified on social media with a background and an explanation. For example, Guy Oil. What does Guy Oil do? What are the threats in terms of corruption and lack of accountability? And how would an APNU or a WIN or an opposition representative on the board help to create accountability and help Guy Oil be a good corporate citizen, awarding contracts fairly, not giving preference, and avoiding corruption? If every single suggestion like that can be informed to the public with a reason why, I rather suspect that you will find the public beginning to agree with you and to understand the governance of a country is drudgery and a grind. And most people don't have the patience to look at all the little details. So it certainly can't be done in a day. It can't be done in a soundbite. It can't even be done in the hour and a half that Nohar gives us. But I think that you have 5 years, suggestion by suggestion, to explain it. And it will be difficult for anyone to oppose if it is done rationally. And perhaps that's the way to create the groundswell that you need to allow transparency and accountability to develop. When we hear about these things like an institute to fight corruption, some organization being created, well, the cat cannot be trusted to create the institution to guard the milk. We've had KANU, we've had SOKU, we've had SARU. I mean, we've had so many organizations specifically developed and touted as independent, and they don't work because they are created by the entity that has the purse strings. I think suggestion by suggestion, the public can be informed of steps that you are proposing, which probably will be ignored, hopefully won't be. But I would like to see that happening. And I'm sorry to direct this at you and put the pressure on you, but you got broad shoulders.
Yeah, and the experience that goes with
Thank
it.
you, Tim.
Yeah, just a comment by Sheikh Abraham. That's true, Globespan has the most mature, fair, and balanced program. I've always enjoyed the experienced host and guests the program has attracted over the years. Folks, I want to also encourage you to log on to buyfromone.com. I'm always amiss in mentioning buyfromone.com if you want your West Indian food, your 7 curries, any part of the United States, they ship food. They ship West Indian groceries and meat. And also, if you're in Richmond Hill, stop by Curry Roti Box. They deliver all over New York, Queens, Brooklyn, Manhattan. And also Travel Span for your travel needs. I really want to extend our gratitude to Devin. Devin put in a lot of extra time leading up to the election, staying up very late with the programs. And, Devin is not the Guyanese, but he's well committed to the Guyanese people in terms of trying to help improve their lives. Gentlemen, it's always been a pleasure. I get so many positive comments about you guys being in this program. Dr. Terence Campbell, we did miss you for a while. We couldn't bring you on because you were in the opposition mode at that point, but certainly we would welcome you to be on, and we want to be able to hold you to the things Timothy Jonas mentioned. I wish you luck, and we will be praying for not only you, but for the President of Guyana, all of the government, and the opposition. That's an instruction that we get from the Holy Bible. We must pray for our leaders, and we certainly do that. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you,
Thank you
Noah.
very
Thank
much,
you.
gentlemen. It was a
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Good night.
Good night.